Housing in our own. And we also have Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York here tonight as well. So I just want to say thank you all. I'm going to invite our mayor up, Mayor Kathy Sheehan, to give some brief welcome remarks.
Thank you. I really want to thank the Division of Human Rights for coming and doing this. This is such an important issue because our families need to know what their rights are, and our property owners need to know what their responsibilities are. And we know that a healthy, stable home is the foundation of people's ability to be able to maintain work, to be able to ensure that their children have a place to do their homework, and a place where they feel safe. And so we have worked really hard as we've wrapped our arms around some of the issues and challenges and the role that we in city government could play in addressing some of those city challenges. We spent a lot of time talking to residents, doing a deep dive, talking with landlords, really trying to understand where the issues are, what the issues are, and how we can ensure that we are putting policies and procedures in place that are helping our families to be able to remain in their homes and thrive. And it's complicated. And so knowing your rights and understanding what the opportunities are is really, really important. So we're grateful for you coming and spending some time in our community. And then also, you know, we're grateful for the team. Sam Wells is here, who was the first hire to help us get our arms around, you know, some of the challenges that we were seeing in our housing stock, which then led to conversations with our code inspectors, which then led to conversations about needing more individuals who are focused on being part of the solution and being there with our families in our community. So I hope everybody has learns a lot tonight. I want to also thank the Division of Human Rights. They did bring food, and I know they want you to eat this food. So please feel free to eat as you have this conversation and get your questions answered and learn. So thank you very much.
And I realized I didn't do this before. My name is Jasmine Higgins, and I'm the inaugural Chief Equity Officer for the City of Albany. I'm joined here by some of our panelists. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. If you could also please provide your pronouns too. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marla Morales. She, her pronouns, Ada. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer and Race Equity Director at the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York. Here, I am actually out of the Albany office on 95 Central.
Hi folks, I'm the Director of Anti-Violence Services at In Our Own Voices. My name is Natasha George, and I use they, them pronouns. We're out on Lark Street in Albany.
Hi, I'm Vic D'Amelia. I'm the Regional Director for the Albany region from the New York State Division of Human Rights, and my pronouns are he, him.
Hi, I'm Sally Santangelo, she, her pronouns. I'm the Executive Director of CNY Fair Housing. We are based in Syracuse, but do some fair housing investigations in the Albany region, which I look forward to telling you more about.
And we have one panelist who is sitting in the crowd because he's on double duty tonight. Christian. Christian.
My name is Christian Gonzalez. I work for the City of Albany. I am the person who work, and I will talking to a little bit more about the grants, opportunities, and things like that.
And I would also like to give a quick shout out to our newly hired housing services advocate, Ashley Hilaire. And we have a number of City of Albany employees here tonight who are here to support and answer any questions that you might have. So with that, I'm going to kick it off to Dina.
Great. Well, first off, everyone, thanks again for joining. What we're going to do is have each panelist speak a little bit about your organization, the services, and especially how they relate to housing. So Sally, you can start us off, and then we can go off in order with Victor.
Sure. Our organization, CNY Fair Housing, is what we call a full service fair housing organization. We serve right now about 17 counties of central and upstate New York. We are based in Syracuse. And in the Albany area, we are providing some limited services in Albany County, Schenectady County, and Montgomery County, primarily through what we call testing. Undercover testing is a primary activity we're doing here. So tell you a little bit about what we do. So we investigate cases of housing discrimination. And we listen to complaints, most of which we receive, via phone, via sometimes in person, and at community events. And we investigate those complaints and try to identify where there may be discriminatory issues in the experiences that people are having in their housing. As part of those investigations, we conduct undercover testing, where we send people out like secret shoppers to try to identify and provide third-party evidence to be able to identify if an issue is discriminatory, if the way someone is being treated is because of their protected status, because of their race or national origin or disability, or because they have kids, or because they have because of their source of income. We do that testing not just based on the complaints that we receive, but we also do audit-based testing where we test certain geographic areas, maybe certain types of housing providers for issues where we suspect there are discriminatory practices occurring. We also we do a lot of counseling and advocacy for individuals whose fair housing rights are being violated, particularly around the areas of reasonable accommodations and modifications for tenants with disabilities. We do have attorneys on staff who provide legal representation. We have 2 attorneys. We only have 12 staff and 2 attorneys on staff. And we file cases in federal and state court, as well as with the Division of Human Rights and with HUD. We do a lot of education outreach like this. And then lastly, we do policy advocacy and research to try to improve housing opportunity. Most recently, we've been doing a lot of work around exclusionary zoning and looking at the way in which the zoning policies and practices of communities make it difficult to build more affordable housing types, such as multifamily housing or any kind of subsidized housing. So we've been doing a lot of policy work around that. We're a little bit unique in that fair housing is our primary and only focus. That is what we do. Even though we get a lot of calls and issues that aren't necessarily fair housing related, we'll provide referrals to individuals. Our primary mission is fair housing. There is not a organization exactly like ours in the Albany area, meaning an organization that solely focused on fair housing organizations. There's a lot of certainly great organizations doing tenants' rights work, doing legal services, but not a organization that is funded. Most of our funding comes from HUD as well as New York State with a contract with the New York State Homes and Community Renewal, but there is not a similar organization. We're hoping that the work that we're doing here can help show the need for more fair housing support in the region. We're looking forward to being able to provide the data from our investigations to help support funding for more fair housing work for the organizations in the region. And with that, I'll turn it over to
So if you could just tell us a quick bit about your organization and the work that you do, and then we're going to get into the first question.
Sure. So I work for the New York State Division of Human Rights. We are the law enforcement agency that investigates complaints under the New York State Human Rights Law. So the New York State Human Rights Law is what was enacted to ensure that you are free essentially of discrimination in New York State. So it was the first law of its kind in the nation. We're number 1. We'd like to think that we're the best. And we've been around for a very long time. And essentially what we're here to do is to ensure that you're able to live where you want, free of any kind of discriminatory aspect to it. Next slide. So we have a bunch of different areas of jurisdiction: employment, housing, public accommodation. What we're primarily going to be talking to you about tonight is housing discrimination. Next slide. So these are the covered bases of housing discrimination under the law. So discrimination means a lot of different things, primarily that I'm being treated differently for some kind of a reason. What we're taking a look at is the legal reasons for, and you can see that these are listed right here. When you get down to something like arrest record, I wanted to specifically touch on that because it's a little bit unique under the statute in that everyone who has a conviction record has an arrest record. Not everyone who has an arrest record has a conviction record. And what the law specifically prohibits is discrimination based on your arrest record. So not your conviction record. So what we're talking about are arrests that were resolved in your favor. You were arrested for something and you were not convicted. Fine. So this is who must abide by the law, and generally speaking, you can see what's listed here, and it's essentially everyone. And what I'd like for everyone to take particular note of is when you get down to number 4, where it says other person having the right to sell, rent, or lease a housing accommodation. And that's really a kind of a catch-all phrase. It's going to encompass everyone. So if you've told your sister that they can rent out your house, your sister is going to be subject to the provisions of the human rights law. Next one. Almost all of housing is covered in New York State. You can kind of see what the listed categories are right here. There are some very specific categories that aren't covered under the human rights law. We're going to kind of get into those on the next slide. Okay, so when we're talking about these are the specific exemptions that fall under the human rights law. When we're talking about owner-occupied two-family dwellings, you're kind of thinking about like what we see here in Albany. Like if you're over on Morris Street, the side-by-side traditional two-family houses where the owner is living on one side and they're renting out the other side. This is very specific to two-family dwellings. It's not three-family dwellings. It's not four-family dwellings. It's specific to two-family dwellings. So the point of that is going to be that if the owner lives there and it's a three-family dwelling, we're going to have jurisdiction over that if they engage in some kind of discrimination, as opposed to if it's a traditional two-family unit, we're not going to have jurisdiction over that. Senior citizen housing, these are going to be typically, you're going to see the 55 and up kind of situations. Rentals of all rooms to individuals of the same sex. You don't see a lot of that anymore. They used to call them the Murphy's boarding house kind of thing. It's your typical house where they're renting out rooms just to men or just to women. We don't have any jurisdiction over that. Owner occupied room rentals, almost the same thing, a little bit different. I'm living in my own house and I'm renting out a room in my house to somebody. And religious institutions can limit their to members of the all of these things are covered under the human rights law, protecting you against discrimination, the refusal to sell, the terms, conditions, and privileges. Those are terms and privileges, conditions and privileges are a little bit different. Terms and conditions are going to be your contract, what your rent is, so on and so forth. Privileges are going to be, is there a swimming pool there? So if there's a swimming pool there, the swimming pool can't be limited for any discriminatory reason. And the advertisement that otherwise expresses discrimination. So in other words, somebody placing an ad that says singles only, families with children not welcome, something like that. That's what that provision is speaking about right there. Okay, again, so you can't use an application that talks about we're not going to rent to particular people because they're single, because they have children, or during the interview process. So if somebody goes to the housing interview and they say to you, we really prefer to rent to somebody who doesn't have children, or we prefer to rent to somebody who's a little bit older, that kind of thing that happens actually while you're being interviewed for the apartment itself or the house. So lawful source of income is something that's fairly recently been added to the housing provisions of the human rights law. Basically, what this is kind of aimed at is the traditional, you're not working, right? So what you would see in housing discrimination is, what do you do for a living? And the answer is, well, I'm on Social Security, or, I get SSI, or, I have a pension. The laws been designed so that it doesn't really matter where your money is coming from, because that really shouldn't be the concern of whoever the landlord or the housing provider is. It's just that you have the money. If I'm making enough money to rent, what does it matter where the money is coming from? So long as it's what? Keeping in mind that this is a lawful source of income. So it's also illegal not only to discriminate against somebody, but to retaliate against somebody because they pose an unlawful discriminatory practice. So if you think that you've been discriminated against and you come to us and you file a complaint, or you go to HUD, and you file a complaint, or you go to Sally's organization and you file a complaint that you think that you've been discriminated against under the human rights law, and then something happens to you, you're evicted, or they're suddenly refusing to make repairs in your apartment or something like that. That's a separate complaint itself under the human rights law, apart from the original complaint that you had already filed. The law also applies to the appraisals being done by the bank. So if the bank comes out to appraise your house and they're looking at your lending qualifications and you're being denied a loan, or you're being given different terms of a loan or any of the prohibited bases, that is also prohibited under the law. You can file a complaint in a variety of different ways. Now, my office specifically is right down in the Empire State Plaza in Agency Building 1. We're there to help you out anytime. You can come into our office. We have a specific housing unit in the Bronx that investigates all complaints of housing discrimination. So while we would not investigate your complaint in the Albany office, we're happy to sit down with you. If you need for us to help you draft a complaint, you can come to us, you can come to the office, we'll draft that complaint to you and send it down to the Bronx. We also have an online complaint portal system that you can go to, and you can file a complaint through that. You can download the complaint form. You can call us on the phone, and we will either take the complaint from you over the phone, or we can mail you a complaint form if none of the other methods work for you. We'll find a way in which you can get the complaint form with us. Once the complaints are filed, and that's really kind of, I'm on the law enforcement end of what the agency does, because we have a variety of different things. We have external relations, education. My office deals with the investigations of the complaints. So you'll come to us, you'll file the complaint, it'll come to, in housing, it's going to go down to the Bronx, right? So they have what are referred to as human rights specialists down there. They're the ones who actually investigate those complaints. And it's really a true investigation. So we don't do paper investigations. What they're going to do is they're going to interview you. They're going to interview whoever it is that you're filing the complaint against. They're going to gather information. They're going to gather documents and all kinds of evidence. At the end of that process, it's going to be turned over to the director of that unit. And what you're looking for is what's referred to as probable cause. And in a nutshell, what that means is there enough information to think that the law might have been violated? The directors are not deciding whether or not the law was violated. We're deciding whether or not there's enough information to believe whether it could have been violated. If the director finds probable cause, it's sent on to a public hearing. It's heard before an administrative law judge. They do what you would think of as a trial, and you kind of go through the same process again. The evidence is put on. If at the end of that process, the judge finds that the law was violated, then there will be a recommended order that the commissioner will then review as to what the remedy should be. The remedies are generally structured as what's known as a make whole remedy, which means exactly what it sounds like. It's designed to make you whole. What you lost is what we're trying to put back into your realm. And additional money for penalties and fines, and if you had mental anguish or something like that, that can also be awarded. There's a compliance review that happens after a period after that. So if the commissioner were to award you $25,000, there's a specific period of time during which you're supposed to be paid that money, and then the compliance review follows up with that to make sure that the checks were actually issued and you actually got the money that you were supposed to get, or whatever the remedy was that you were supposed to get. Any questions? Sure.
These slides presented somewhere too. Do you have a copy?
We can share them with you, definitely. No problem.
Question, actually.
Yes.
Just curious, you may not know, and that's okay, the source of the exemption for two family owner occupied.
I'm not, that's gonna be a.
For this back when it was originally drafted, so,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yes,
What kind of timelines are you able to process these complaints on, from initial complaint to a finding?
so generally speaking, we'll complete an investigation within 180 days. And that's from the time they filed the complaint until the director makes their determination.
Is there any possibility of temporary relief?
Generally speaking, no. And the reason for that is because by statute, we're a neutral law enforcement agency, so we don't know that the law has been violated until we actually make the determination.
No, I'll just add, we often file cases, in federal court, and so if it's warranted, we may seek a temporary, a preliminary injunction to change the behavior of the housing provider while the case is being, or the cases do take a very long time, but there may be an option, if the circumstances warrant it, to provide immediate relief, depending on the circumstances.
Just a follow-up, so what is the record of the landlords in like the Albany or the Capital District? Have you had a lot of cases that either has gone, either one of you could answer, like, do we have a big problem here locally?
I mean, I'm happy to talk about some what we've seen in some of our testing. I don't want to discuss that now, but
Sorry, we're gonna have a general Q&A afterwards, but that's a great question, because I think that we should definitely open it up to all the panelists. I'm sure the Legal Aid Society will definitely have some thoughts on that question, but before we open up the Q&A, let's hear from our next panelist.
Hi. My name is Natasha, like I mentioned earlier, right? And I'm with In Our Own Voices. So essentially what In Our Own Voices is an organization that was created by. Oh, sorry, yeah. So I do also tend to murmur, so please let me know. So I'm with In Our Own Voices, and basically what In Our Own Voices is that we were created by and for LGBTQ+ folks who are also Black, Indigenous people of color, right? We noticed that a lot of our needs weren't being met, and our community faces homelessness at extremely high rates, or houselessness, rather. So keeping that in mind, some of the services that we provide, we do some emergency assistance when we have the ability to do so, right? So that can look like helping with relocation, that can look like trying to put somebody up in a hotel, but a lot of the services that we do provide are primarily around advocacy work, right? So if someone is coming to us and saying, my landlord is discriminating against me because I am a trans or LGBTQ+ person, then we're going to say, okay, well, how do we work with you? How do we work with Legal Aid Society to try and make sure that we can get something done about this, right? Finding folks, resources within the community that actually care about our community are actually here to support us, right? So some of the lovely folks on the panel, but yeah, that's a little bit about what we do.
It's great to meet. Hi, everyone. Again, Marlene from the Legal Aid Society. At the Legal Aid Society, we're a law firm, so we provide free legal services to low to medium, moderate income families in the capital region. Actually, we cover 16 counties. We go down to Green Columbia all the way to St. Lawrence, the Canadian border. Out of the Albany office, we cover Albany, Rensselaer, Schenectady, Green, and Columbia. And we have, so it's any essential needs, food, housing, public benefits. So we have, right now, I am supervising the foreclosure prevention project, which is for homeowners who are facing foreclosure, whether it's tax foreclosure or mortgage foreclosure. We also help some tenants who are in properties that are in foreclosure. We also have specifically for housing, we have a big housing unit that does eviction prevention. Again, it's mostly landlord tenant, so we're defending tenants in eviction court all throughout the county. And we have a little program for rapid rehousing, and that's for folks who are in shelter and need relocation assistance as well. Obviously, we do more than that. We have a little bit of some attorneys that focus on worker protection. So workers who are facing employment discrimination or wage and hour issues with their employer. We also have programs that focusing on survivors of domestic violence and programs. There's a newish program of education law project for focusing specifically on the school to prison pipeline issue. So anything that you have, any legal issue, civil legal issue, we don't do criminal. You might be able to get either empower you with the tools to advocate for yourself, or we can help you with it, and or connect you with the resources to help with the situation.
Then Christian, can you please just tell us a little bit about yourself and the position and what you do here?
Absolutely, let me just come forward. So
Please do.
Oh,
What'd you do, Christian?
I have superpowers.
All right, there we go.
Just give it a minute to connect the devices and then we can take it from there.
But in the interim, please feel free to get up and have some food while we
Yes, let's take a quick break, okay?
some water. Hey, let's do it. You want water? I was so happy that it's.
Well done, that's a great match.
Trying not to focus, but it's hard for me to.
Yeah,
I'm working on it.
I get nervous too, but that doesn't happen to me.
It's funny, we went to everybody else on Monday. And I was like, it's an hour the whole time. And it didn't. So.
Wow.
But it did, but I'm every time.
Yes.
All right, looks like we are back and running, which is good. My name is Christian Gonzalez Borrero. I do carry two last names. The reason being because I carry my mom's last name as well. So Gonzalez from my father, Borrero from my mother. Hispanic population, we do carry two last names. But I'm okay. You can call me Christian, Mr. Gonzalez, Mr. Borrero. It's okay. We're all the same. So I work for the city of Albany, and all these programs are specifically for the city of Albany. So all these programs are for repair or purchase a house in the city of Albany. We do have Choose Albany. There's 9 programs in total. We also have HAP program, which is Home Acquisition Program. We have the SRP, Senior Rehabilitation Program. We also have the RAP, which is Rehabilitation Assistance Program. RAP 2, Rehabilitation Assistance Program 2. HOA, Homeowners Assistance Program. TARP, Tenants Assistance Rehabilitation Program. Access, and lead-based pain hazard. So I know it's a lot to take. I will break it down a little bit. Next slide. Choose Albany. This is my favorite one. I'll explain to you why. Choose Albany is a down payment assistance. It's non-federal, so we don't have to obey the rules and regulations by the top agencies. There is up to 8,500 that we can assist for down payment and closing costs. The best part is that there is no income restriction. Kudos for that. So this is specifically for the city of Albany. The another thing that we have to keep in mind is that once you participate in this program, you have to stay in the house for 5 years. After 5 years, the grant will be forgiven. The HAP program, it is a down payment assistance. However, the funds come from the federal agency from HUD. You have to be, it must be owner occupied for 5 years. The assistance is up to $14,900, which is go towards closing costs and down payment. The purchase price may not exceed for a single family $229, for 2 families $293, for a 3 families $355,000, and for a 4 family would be $440,000. Keep in mind, these numbers will go up after July 1st. So which means the purchase price gonna increase. If I'm not mistaken, the single family is gonna be go up to $247,000, the purchase price. We go based on the household income must be at or below 80%. The SRP program was created for the senior. This program is for a emergency rehabilitation program. It is HUD funded and must be owner occupied for 3 years. The assistance is up to $5,000, and the household income must be at or below 80%. The applicant must be 62 years old or above. Next slide, please. The RAP program is similar to the SRP program, but this program is for folks that are below 62. They're under 62 years old. Sorry. It's still for emergency program. It is HUD funded, must be owner occupied for 3 years, and the assistance is up to $5,000. This household income must be at or below 80%. No age restriction. RAP 2 program, it is a still emergency program, but this program is for individuals that are higher income. So if the individual don't qualify for the SRP, which is for the senior, or the RAP program, then we look into have the individual apply for RAP 2, which is for a higher income bracket. Example of emergency assistance program, it will be a roof leaks, broken step, electrical, heating assistance, plumbing emergencies, sewer backups, hot water tank, heaters, broken water pipe. Of course, there's more situation where it be considered as emergency, such as a broken window. We had a client where someone bumped her front door, and that will be considered as an emergency. And we do take care of these cases. We try to be as quick as possible and fix the situation. Next slide, please. The HOA program is our #1 program. The reason why is because we can offer up to $40,000 to make repairs in the home. Not necessarily have to be in a emergency for you to apply for this program. You can have multiple issues. Perhaps you have a code violation. They need an address from stairs, or perhaps the heater system stopped working. This program can address that, not to exceed the $40,000. And still, we have to take into consideration the household income, 80%. That's the income that we realize. Yep. Next slide. The TARP program, this one is for landlords. TARP program was designated to make the home affordable and helping the landlords. So this program assists up to $6,000 per bedroom. We don't count living room or bathroom as a bedroom, okay? It's just a bedroom has a closet that will be considered a bedroom. This program goes based on the tenant's income, 60% median income. The unit must be occupied by these individuals who are low and moderate income. And there is a peer affordability depending on how much money we invest in the property. If it's under $15,000, the owner must keep the property for 5 years. If it's between $15,000 and $40,000, the owner must keep the property for 10 years. Anything above $40,000, it is 15 years, which means the owner, in this case will be the landlord, cannot live in the property, and this property will continue to be renting to a low and moderate income individual. Example of deficiency address is electrical, plumbing, windows, doors, roofing, carpentry, etc. That's something that we can address with the TARP program and HOA program, which is the one that we assist to $40,000. Next slide. The assets program is also another program that I really have the passion to working with, because this program is designated to help vulnerable population. This case will be someone who is disabled. Improving to allow person to remain in their home. It is crucial. It is a non-federal program. This program is strictly for the city of Albany. And the individual have to live on the property for 3 years. Applicant must be elderly or disabled, and the assistance is up to $25,000. Things that we can do with these programs are building a ramp, expand the doorways, moving a shower from the second floor to the first floor to have more accessibility. And what I like about this program is that, let's say the tenant is the one who has disability and would like to remain on the house, the landlord can apply for this program, which is something great. Well, that being said, Christian Gonzalez, work for the city of Albany, and I do have my contact information back there on the table. That is my my direct line and my email. You guys are more than welcome to call me, email me. I'll be more than happy to help you with the application process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Commissioner.
you.
So I'm gonna get into really the first question. Can each of you please tell us a specific example of a case that your agency or organization has recently worked on within the context of fair housing? Start on this side. Sorry, so you did, so.
Last first, so we work a lot, so there's a lot, like Sally was saying, a lot of reasonable accommodation issues that we see in the landlord tenant side. Specifically for when someone's facing eviction and it's due to a disability of one of the household members. So our attorneys are constantly advocating and using it. Also the fair housing and the reasonable accommodation tool to prevent the eviction. I can't go into specifics, but it's usually usually public housing. We do a lot of those. And it's not so much physical disability, but definitely a lot of tenants who are suffering from mental illness and need reasonable accommodations to remain in the housing of last resort. So that's something that's always that we're always dealing with.
So essentially the question is like a specific case we've been working on fair housing.
As much as you can get into considering the confidentiality aspect of human rights.
Yeah, I think one of the first cases that comes to mind that kind of, am I being too quiet again? Yes, okay. One of the first cases that comes to mind for me is in particular this young trans man that I was working with. He had been escaping from a domestic violence situation and also trying to relocate to a place that was a little bit more liberal, right? What with all of the laws and everything that have recently been proposed and legislation that's recently been proposed around trans and LGBTQ plus folks, it was dangerous where he was living. But when he came here, it was unsafe for him. He wasn't able to find solid housing. So one of the things that we were able to do is create a plan for him to find somewhere that was safer for him to be, use emergency assistance to help him relocate, stay in a hotel for a couple of days, paid for his U-Haul to be able to move in with family members, and just make sure that he was on solid ground. One of the things that I recognize, especially at our agency, is that when people are coming to you with an issue around housing, it's not just housing, right? It's also everything else that comes along with it. It's your identity. It's whether or not you have access to food. It's whether or not people are going to hire you for a job. So we're also working on all of those things along with trying to find a safe place to live. So yeah. Yeah.
Again, we can't really get into like the real specifics of any of the particular cases, but we're seeing a lot of cases that are involving disability related discrimination within the agency, and it can be, a variety of different disabilities. It doesn't necessarily have to be a physical disability. It can come down to something that we've seen recently where it's accommodations for animals, where people need some kind of an animal that will assist them in being able to live in the comfort of their apartment, and so on and so forth. And those are all things that are covered under the law. So we've seen, many recent cases where there are situations where landlords are either refusing to rent or trying to get people out of their housing accommodations because they may need some kind of an assistive animal to enable them to use that property. So we're seeing a big that.
I'm trying to look up non-disclosure agreements in case of really quick, so I remember which ones. Well, I can tell you some specifics about a few cases that we've actually filed in this area because they were filed in federal court, so the complaints are publicly available. So I'll tell you about a couple of them. First, we filed several cases related to denials of refusals to provide sign language interpreters at assisted living centers, and including properties in Guilderland, Delmar, and Colony, Peregrine, and Atria were some of those housing providers. We've also Home Sweet Home and one more. And so those cases we did file in federal court within the last about a year and a half. A few of them have settled, and without reviewing quickly those non-disclosure agreements, I won't say wow they settled, but we filed those cases on behalf of our organization, because as a fair housing organization we have legal standing to bring complaints because of the frustration of our mission. And so oftentimes an individual maybe isn't able to bring a complaint because they're in crisis. They're, maybe they're moving, maybe they just don't have the time and resources. We can actually still pursue and bring fair housing complaints to change the behavior of those housing providers. And we're usually often seeking not, damages, but we're seeking change in their behavior. We want to make sure that they're not going to discriminate against the next person who comes in. We're making sure they're changing their policies and doing things like that. The other case I can talk about in this area was we actually settled a case that related to accessible design and construction, and against a property, actually a company that owns 50 properties in 6 states, including a property in Saratoga. It's a senior housing provider. The company is Clover Group, and they have 3 properties in the Syracuse area. They have one in Utica area, one in Binghamton, and a bunch in Western New York. We had settled a case against them for that was alleging their failure to design their properties to meet accessibility standards. And that settlement is going to require them to do about $6.5 million worth of modifications to the properties to make them accessible. And that it's at 50 properties in 6 states that were included as part of that investigation. We have another case still pending against that same company related to assigned parking, reasonable accommodations for assigned parking, and additional charges for that alleges that they charge more if you need to live near the elevator or on the first floor, so another disability case. And I will say the company has also recently been sued by a former employee for race discrimination in the placement of and how they choose to place their properties. So that is pending. The one case that's still pending is we're going through litigation process. It's been years. We started the case in 2018. We began an investigation against them and it is still ongoing for 5 years. But this is, we'll go as far as we need to get justice in this case.
And can you please just explain what standing is?
Sure, so standing means, and I'm not an attorney, I just pretend to be an attorney. Standing means that we have basically we've suffered harm and therefore have a legal reason or legal basis for filing a case in court. I hope that is that good? All right, our attorneys are behind me. So we can argue as an organization that because a housing provider's discriminatory behavior harms our mission of ending discrimination, then we have standing if they discriminate. And because we spend our money and resources, trying to stop them, so that we establish standing. It's really important for the purposes of changing behavior, because a lot of times people don't realize they've been discriminated against. Somebody might, they have an interaction with a housing provider and walk away and not realize that they were treated differently. And so, we're able to, find those cases that may otherwise be hidden and then bring action.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
I'm sorry, it's a lot.
Kristen, would you like to add anything? I don't want to.
Let's say anybody have any question that would like to answer, things come out of this.
I have a question. Is it, when there's all of these type of grants, down payment assistance, and you present that information to a mortgage company, and they tell you, well, we have to see if that's allowed. Is that some type of a red flag for going down the lines of discrimination? Because when you live in New York, you have these assistance programs, and the mortgage companies know about it. The funding is allocated to the institution. Why is there pushback?
Good question. So some lenders they do have a deadline in terms of do the closing. And our program, unfortunately, we have to submit all the paperwork to the HUD agency for approval and things like that, receive the voucher and approval. And that takes some time, between 4 to 6 weeks, which is, I understand, is kind of reasonable for a lender to wait and provide the assistance for down payment closing costs. I am not sure of the nature, whether or not that will be discriminatory, but I do know that they do have deadlines and to close, do the close.
The last time the lenders
Please, Christian, can you come up? So I'm sure a lot of people are gonna have questions for you.
Hopefully the lights is off.
Sorry, I don't know if you wanted to add
Well,
something, but.
So I think, so this came up the other day in reviewing info, and there was a question about lenders that had come up about lenders who weren't taking certain types of assistance programs. And I think that would be source of income discrimination, but there isn't a lot of case law on source of income when it comes to lending. We're starting to get a lot of case law on source of income when it comes to renters, like you can't refuse a Section 8 voucher, you can't refuse public assistance. But we don't have a lot of case law on source of income and lending, or a lot of guidance on it, which is, something that maybe we need to work on to make sure lenders aren't refusing to accept assistance programs. Because that should be a source of income case, so. I have notes to follow up on that, so I'll harass DHR about it.
I mean, I think that what we can reasonably say, from Vision's perspective would be that what we would generally tell people is, you can always file a complaint. We're not going to tell people that they can't file a complaint. you can go ahead and file a complaint and we'll investigate the complaint and we would see, you know, where it played out.
I think it's fair now that we open up to the general Q&A. I'm sure that everyone's taken in a lot of information, and has a lot of questions. So if you could please just raise your hand and we'll go around the room and get to as many people as we can. In the back of the white shirt.
For Christian, what grants are available for those that do not meet the federal guidelines?
Depending on what the individual is looking for. If it's for down payment assistance, we have the Choose Albany. There is no income restriction. And we also have an emergency program, it's called Route 2, that is a higher income bracket. So that's something that we can explore.
Is the RAP student federally?
No.
No?
Someone else in the back had their hand up and then. Yes, go ahead.
What is the current AMI?
AMI is pretty much the trying to translate on my head, I'm sorry. The income for the
I can help you out.
Please.
It's the average median income
Yes.
of the region. So usually for Albany, it would be the metropolitan area of Albany, Troy, and Schenectady.
Sorry, can you say that again, please? The bus.
How much is it right now in terms of?
It depends on the household size. The medium income, I want to
It
say it's
is-
like 190.
Sure, it is 80% for we go based on 60% and 80%. 80% is from the owner. If someone is trying to apply for a down payment assistance or perhaps home improvement, 60% are just for the tenants. Let's say the landlords that want to apply for the grant, then the tenants have to be 60%.
Do you happen to know the dollar amount? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Household of one,
I just looked it up, so
thank you.
I'm sorry. One person household in the county of Albany is 54,350. That's 80% AMI. 54,000.
I think, I don't want to use those numbers because our numbers are a little bit higher.
Yeah.
For 80% is now gonna be 89,750.
Yes. Household.
New income guidelines, that's. That's 80%.
Yeah. So the numbers are reasonable. That's what they say, low and moderate income individuals, not mean to be in poverty. It just, they have guidelines to follow because it's a federal fund, it's a federal grant. Yep.
Does anyone else have any questions? Or, you had a question too, sir, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was gonna relay a question from online.
Oh.
So this is more about source of income. Valerie, who works for a nonprofit that administers or gives out housing subsidies, talks about trying to help people who they give subsidies to, people with disabilities. And they keep running into landlords or property managers who ask for 30 times income to qualify for an apartment. So some landlords will work with them and will allow for some sort of counting of the subsidy in their income, and others will not. Any advice or tips on how to process this?
So we've filed 3 cases specifically on income requirements in the last couple of years, 2 years or so, including one case in the Albany area. Well, we didn't file it, we worked on the AG's office with the Attorney General's office on it. Housing providers should not establish income requirements that effectively keep voucher holders from being able to rent. And we've been successful, including getting probable cause findings with DHR that successful in those cases. So if there is, so if somebody has, if a housing provider has an income requirement, it should be based on the tenant's portion of the rent. And not the full rent amount if they have a voucher. And they also can't have an income requirement that say You have to make 4 times the rent amount because that would effectively keep a voucher holder from being able to rent. And the best practice is that if you have somebody with a voucher, then they shouldn't even be doing an income check because the housing authority or the agency issuing that has already done that. And DHR's guidance on this is really good. And so they could, one, provide the guidance, DHR's guidance to the housing provider and say, here, this guidance says you can't have this income requirement. And if that isn't enough, they can file a complaint with DHR. And they can also, I mean, we're always happy to investigate as well and see if it's something that we can provide testing support as well for.
Oh, perfect, okay. I saw some other hands up if you would, in the New York hat.
Yes. To DHR, in regards to their housing in the city of Albany specifically. How many cases have you seen where tenants are living in substandard conditions? And because of the housing shortage that we have, and those issues regarding trying to find an apartment, and being told you need 3 times the income to move in. How many complaints, have you seen recent complaints in regards to that? Because tenants can't move out of certain properties that aren't being tended to properly?
I can't say that we have. I mean, generally speaking, we're not going to have the ability to investigate complaints involving substandard housing per se, because it's not an issue of discrimination. So it would be a little bit outside the scope of what we're authorized to look into.
So when we're talking about discrimination, and in black and brown communities, right? So we have these landlords or these people who come in and get these properties, and then, you know, they're renting to low income people. So they feel like they don't have to put that much effort into the property for that tenant to stay there, to be safe, to, you know, not be bit by mice or roaches or ants. How should someone address that?
Well, you can certainly file a complaint with the agency if you feel that you're not having necessary repairs made because of some kind of a discriminatory basis. It gets a little bit complicated when you're talking about an issue that it's being done for a discriminatory reason as opposed to it's just a slumber.
So when we have these big, I would say, people who own larger properties with over 50 or more units in it, and the whole property is dilapidated, right? And the tenants are suffering because the water's being turned off all day, or the lights get turned on. And because they're taking HUD, they feel like these people are not important.
I mean, those kinds of issues are something that someone, because they are taking money from HUD, that's something that HUD would look into if that were the case. But it would generally be outside the scope of the Division of Human Rights Authority to look into things.
And we do have a city, just speaking on behalf of the city of Albany, our city codes department will come and assess for code violations. But there is the fact that should they deem it unfit, unsafe, the building might get shut down.
Yeah.
So, right, trying to figure out how to bridge that gap between finding someone somewhere to live, but also ensuring that we're doing our legal remedy and aspect and citing and shutting things down.
Thank you. And definitely, there is an implied warranty of habitability for every single landlord. So that's something that you may want to seek out. Definitely a HUD complaint would be one. And it's soon enough, tenants were going to be able to actually file affirmatively in like the city of Albany for warranty of habitability. So that would be something. Again, in HUD, there are the standard housing, these are the housing quality standards that they have to follow. So if conditions are really bad, they're in violation.
I just want to add that sometimes you might, if you have a housing provider that has properties in different locations with different demographics, and you can show that the property that they are renting out to people of color, they are not maintaining, and the property that they're renting out in a suburban neighborhood to white residents, they are maintaining. There have been some cases filed across the country, if you can show that. But it's hard, right? It's hard, it's a hard thing to get the exact right situation where someone's doing that, because a lot of times landlords, the slumlords that we're talking about, they specialize in one type of housing, and because they know that they especially will specialize in the housing that they can extract the most profit from by putting the least amount of money into it. And so it becomes challenging without that comparison to be able to make a fair housing case out of it. Certainly a codes case, and certainly, other issues, but.
Awesome.
Thank you for that.
From the city perspective, I just want to remind folks that we do have a new housing services advocate.
Absolutely, raise your hand,
And so
please.
they can, so Ashley can be your contact, please make contact with Ashley, so. At least it's a friendly face to help navigate the systems here in Albany by not just city services, but we have a lot of not-for-profit organizations and housing advocates here today. And Ashley can help navigate some of that, or stand aside along with you as you work through these issues.
Are there any more questions? All right, I'm sorry, can we go to someone who hasn't asked one first? Ms. Arlene?
I have a question. Do you work with agencies in a proactive way to ensure that people are going to have their best opportunity for success with housing? We recently met someone who's a returning citizen. She had been in prison for 23 years. And she's looking for a place to live. She has no income. And she's got some other things that are going on with her, but being away from society for 23 years, not having a job and some other things that she might need, suggests that she might have needed to have been placed somewhere that was more supportive, where she could have gotten some counseling, or where she could have received assistance to help her to become reacclimated. Find a job, get training or something like that before she gets launched into the wild. So, talking about school to prison pipeline is like creating a situation where people can be set up to fail and get sent back to prison and don't have to. So do you ever talk to corrections about how they manage things when they're releasing people?
I say we do a lot of work in the Syracuse area and in some of the areas where we have been serving for a lot longer and have deeper connections and where we are working with networks to make sure that people are connected with services and provide referrals and also make sure the systems are working. But it's so often when people call, there's 5 things they need assistance with. So trying to connect people with all of those things can be challenging.
Well, there should be a plan, for when people are coming, are being released, for where they're going to go. There should be some supportive housing in place for them. So are there any initiatives? I mean, we did a lot of work to try to find a place for her, but that took a lot of time, and it was really hard finding something like that. And I'm grateful that we were able to make that connection, but there ought to be some kind of strategy to help people.
I hear you, Ms. Arlene. We can talk offline. All right,
So it's on the list of something again.
I got a list, don't worry. And the back, sir, in the jersey.
Yeah, I have a question. Concern is when I hear about having major problems with the landlord. One of the solutions would be if you didn't have them, if those low income home ownership programs are effective. You will own the house, you have to build a man. So my question is this, how effective is the low income home ownership program? Do you have any statistics to tell us just how many people have actually gotten houses through those programs?
Christian, do you have any?
So, since I came on board with the city of Albany, which it was in July 26, 2021, our number has increased to 80%. So that's 80% of the applicants have proven application.
No, my question is, how many people, 5, 15, 10, 100? If you have the, that's low.
Yeah, they are.
So where did we get that?
We average about 10.
Where did I get the data?
Well, we have it on our website, there's a report, our yearly report from, I look at, I'll make sure I get it in the day, we average, just for this program, it's based on how much funding we get from funding, and we average about 10 to 15 people come through that homeowner program.
10, 15 people apply, get out.
No, it's, access needs to program. Yes, get approved.
Who was actually downtown, how many?
Between 10 and 15, and.
Every 10 and 15 people who actually downtown. And that information on your website.
Yeah, it's in a report, but I can show you.
Okay, if I can get the data, because my concern is this. I've been living in Arbor Hill since 1980. And I have seen tenants come and go, they don't own anything. And it's terrible, the kind of conditions that they have to place. And there have been so-called home ownership programs for low income people. Yet I don't see many low income people, at least not where I live. Nobody in them. Nobody, on my whole block owns a house. There's folks that need low income home ownership programs. So I just wonder how effective are they? Maybe they're very effective, and I just don't, that's not in touch. I don't see anybody. I haven't met one person who got a house. Who wanted to be low income home.
And I think that's one of the purpose of the
Home and the tenant problem will be solved to a large extent if you can have a tenant. If a low income person owns their house, they listen.
So, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're having this outreach to reach out the community, like yourself, encourage them, go talk to Christian, direct line or direct email. I'll be more than happy to walk him through the process and guide him and educate them in the home ownership process. I know it's difficult, but I think I have basic knowledge to help that individual, okay, and give them the guidance that they need.
Well, I don't want to condemn the program, but I have it. Think the effective, I just don't know people. But if I could see those numbers. Yeah.
Well, sir, and to your point, we have a new neighborhood and community services department with some neighborhood specialists, some of whom are sitting here. I will not name them by name just yet because you'll have time to go meet them. But they're going to work in part on this communication aspect, making sure that the information is getting to the community on the boots, on the ground type of work. So you'll start seeing them, especially during this warmer weather. And feel free to stop them, ask them a question, but we're trying to get better about making sure that the community, especially the people who are in need, know about all the resources and services that are available here at the city, like your point, right? So we know we have to do better ensuring that people know about the resource. So we're gonna make sure you get that information, but I would invite you to come speak to some folks after this, all right? Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions?
I did have a question. Okay, so I just want to kind of circle back to the question the young lady asked regarding the type of discrimination that you guys handle around your school with support. I was hearing that. And it does seem that a lot of it revolves around like ADA accommodation. So I was just wondering if you guys would be able to kind of elaborate on the scope of, what type of discrimination cases that you guys handle regarding housing?
Sure, well, I mean, you can file a complaint with the Division of Human Rights Law, regardless of what type of disability you might have. Pretty much everything is going to be considered to be a disability under the Human Rights Law. I could give you the definition, but I don't think that it would really like clarify it a little anymore for you. So it wouldn't really matter if it was a physical disability or if it was some other type of disability that might be unseen. They still have the ability to file a complaint, and the landlord or the housing provider still has the duty to accommodate what that is.
So are you saying that your agency primarily handles just disability claims against housing?
No, that's one type of.
So what other type of discrimination?
Okay, so the bases, I think I've got the key here somewhere.
On the slide, I'm just saying.
Yeah. That's earlier.
And I can talk a little bit about that, like, I do work at the bond office, and one of the things we also see is Section 8 vouchers. That's one big campaign that we're pushing in the city. Landlord cannot deny that source of income, Section 8 voucher, also advertising it. I remember when I first moved to the city, I used to see no Section 8 vouchers allowed.
Yeah.
That is a no-no, and that definitely is also one of the most popular complaints that we see. Also people trying to steer families of color towards certain neighborhoods. you know,
Okay,
versus
so that's
others.
what I was trying to get at, is that do you guys, handle complaints regarding families of color? Things like marital status.
Yes, so it's your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, domestic violence victim status, something like that. So you may see, that's a fairly new area of the law, and that may play out in a way where you may have somebody who's a victim of domestic violence who moves into an apartment, and the landlord becomes aware of the fact that the person's a domestic violence victim, and they're concerned that perhaps the person is the perpetrator of domestic violence is going to be coming to that place and causing some kind of a problem. That's kind of way that you might see something like that play out.
Okay.
Be it more as the law evolves.
I can tell you what our complaints are. So our organization, historically, about 50% of our complaints are disability related.
Okay.
So last year, 50%, about 53% of our cases were disability related. Last year, that was followed by source of income, which was 20% of our cases, and then the remaining protected classes make up the rest of that. Race, last year, race and color were third. In previous years, we've had familial status, sometimes discrimination against families or children has been third or fourth. We did have 1 year in recent years where sex and gender was second, because we had a sexual harassment case with 40 complainants against the landlord in the city of Oswego. So we had 40 complaints, 40 different women who had complained about sexual harassment. So that became number 2 that year. Across the country, nationwide, disability cases are about 50% of all fair housing cases across the country. The National Fair Housing Alliance compiles fair housing trends every year, and they actually will be releasing the report in the next couple of weeks for 2022, and it will actually detail exactly what types of complaints, fair housing complaints, have been received by fair housing organizations, as well as HUD and other publicly available complaint data. It'll actually, the new report will be out in the next few weeks, if you're interested.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In the blue? Yeah, I'm sorry.
With the grants that you guys offer, do you have a list of grants for people who are single households where it's one human, no miniature humans at all?
So our program started at low and moderate income. It could be a single person with a household of 1, or it could be a household of 2, the person in charge. A household of 1, just to give you an idea, the income limit is 61,000. Yep.
If I'm, say, just, browsing Craigslist, looking at, for rent ad, and I see an ad that, states clearly at the bottom, saying all caps, no Section 8 allowed. I obviously may not apply to rent there, thinking that the landlord's gonna find some other reason to say no to me if I present them with the fact that that's illegal, but where can I go to report that advertisement or that landlord if I'm not trying to rent?
Well, you can come to the City Commission on Human Rights, you can go to the state too.
Attorney General. Yes.
And I'll just say, we have an email address. You can email us at tips@dhr.ny.gov, tips@dhr.ny.gov. I mean, we're really gonna be looking to see, is this a landlord that does this all the time? Is this like a systemic problem? But still, it would be helpful for us to know.
The city email is humanrights@albanyny.gov. You can send it to me, it'll go straight to me, I'll call you back or I'll email you, Miss Ivy does this.
And I'll just add, we do have a contract to do testing in Albany County and Schenectady County, with the state, homes community renewal. So, we do have a contract to do testing in this area, so we're, always happy to look at, receive tips on housing providers, and then we can pursue complaints as well.
So about 10 years ago, I was fortunate to purchase my two-family with the grant program. It was called the Match Program. Like I said, a two-family home. So today, in today's market, I'm a realtor. And the grant program doesn't really work because it's very competitive out there. So you have people coming with cash, you have people coming with conventional loans, you have people coming with, FHA loans. And when you get down, this person has a grant, a lot of sellers don't want to wait for the process. So are you guys closing deals today with the grant program? And if so, how are you doing that? Because a lot of buyers do not want people with grant program.
We have closed some deals to this day. I think a lot of it has to do with education, educating the seller, the lender, and that's what I become available for, to speak with them, to explain to them the process and see how can I do at my end to process things faster. So trying to talk to lenders, realtors, and the buyers to make it happen. Of course, not every case is goes smoothly as we want to, but some others say, you know what, we're just gonna give it a try. Sometimes it's like not what we say is how we say it, and that helps a lot. Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, but in reality, it really doesn't work like that, to be honest with you, because I am out there. And a lot of times, I'm gonna say 99% of the time, especially like I said, today's market, it is very, very competitive. And it's the low shortage of homes.
Yep.
So you have people, houses are going for 200,000, and then you have somebody that's offering 250,000. So that person that has that grant, it's unfortunate, they always lose out. And this has happened. I have a client right now, she has a grant program. We've been looking over a year and it just doesn't work.
Yep.
And the only way I see a person with a grant program getting a house is the house been on the market for a long time and nobody else wants it. You understand what I mean? And that's how it is.
I think a lot of has to do with the nature of how today's market is. Everybody's so, even buyers without rent, like myself. I did with an inspection and I still didn't get the deal. It's hard. So, but it's not a permanent situation. The grant will be permanent. So we hopefully things like that will pass by and we can continue helping others. But as of right now, we don't have the control to supply more houses for this crisis to kind of ease, but that's what we're dealing with now. And my apologies.
Richard? Yeah, I guess for the State Division of Human Rights, can you talk a little bit about the length of time that it takes for you to resolve a complaint, or does it depend on the nature of the complaint? But just generally, how long?
Yeah, sure. So, Generally speaking, from the time that you actually file the complaint, right, until we make some kind of a determination at the regional level as to whether or not probable cause, it's gonna be about 6 months. It's gonna be about 180 days. Sometimes it's longer than that, and sometimes it's a lot shorter than that, and it's going to depend on the complexity of the complaint. Some complaints are very complex, and they'll take a longer period of time to investigate, and some complaints are very simple, and they may take a month to investigate. So it's really, it's kind of in that range of anywhere between 0 to 180 days, and it could fall in anywhere within that period.
Does staffing that you have anything to do with it? Is the staffing adequate or?
Staffing, I think staffing for everybody everywhere is always an issue. I think that we would always like to have more staffing. But I think also that, a lot of it has to do with, the complexity of any one particular complaint. Some complaints are very complex and others simply aren't.
In relation, is there anything? I assume there's nothing in state law that would preclude a locality to try and address or resolve a discrimination issue that might be covered under the state non-discrimination law or localities non-discrimination.
Well,
or is that?
I want to give you a very general answer to that question, because under the state human rights law, you do have an election right. You essentially get one bite of the apple. So you can't go to 5 different places and file the same complaint. And even if someone were to file, let's say that they were to separately file a complaint with the state division, and then they went to HUD and they filed a complaint directly with HUD. Generally speaking, the agencies work together, and you're only going to get one investigation and you're going to get one determination. We'll coordinate with HUD to figure out who's going to do that, but only one of us is going to do it.
I'll just, and there are some, municipalities that do have fair housing enforcement, capacity, like New York City Human Rights Commission. Westchester has a, Human Rights Commission that does actually do complaint investigation and enforcement. Geneva, the city of Geneva had one for a while. I don't think that's active anymore. But there are a couple cities that do have that designation. And sometimes we actually will file a case administratively with HUD or with the Division of Human Rights, and then we move the case to court, to federal or state court. For different reasons, sometimes because HUD in particular can take a while. So HUD complaints are supposed to be investigated within 100 days. And we've had cases, investigations that have taken as many as 3 years. We have one investigation right now that's been going on for 2 years, just in the investigation stage. And so sometimes we'll move a case, move the case to court, it's called electing to court, so we will elect a case to usually federal court.
Are there any other questions?
So again, about the timeline, so according to, you answered Richard's question, you said, it's about maybe up to 180 days for a finding of probable cause. But what about the final determination? How much longer does that take?
Well, it depends on what the determination is. So at the end of the actual investigation, you're either going to get a finding of probable cause or no probable cause. So a finding of no probable cause is the end of the investigation.
Like, if you get a finding of probable cause, how
If
much?
you get a finding of probable
About a
cause,
year and a half.
about a year and a half, Manny, about a year and a half
From that
From
point,
the
from that
complaint.
point.
so like 2 years potentially altogether. Okay, thank you.
The person is the victim of discrimination at this time. Alive, getting a might not. Resolution, so if they keep for the housing. No, they're not. They're not getting access. The
the housing that they saw. Or if it's before there. Because there's no. In the interim while they're waiting, there's no remedy for them.
Well, that's not necessarily true. There's all throughout the process, and even during the investigatory process, we try to resolve the complaint, where the parties are agreeing, right? You know, it's no different types of alternative dispute resolution. We refer to it as conciliation. Okay, and basically what it means is we try to come to some kind of a meeting of the mind, some kind of a resolution where both parties are gonna wind up. Think of it as a settlement. Okay, and that may happen at the investigatory stage, or it may happen after probable cause has been found, and it happens at the hearings.
About 20% of our cases will end up settling.
So I'll say the vast majority of our cases settle. In my 10, 11 years with my agency, we've had 3 cases that have gone to administrative hearings. We've never had a case, I shouldn't say that, we had 1 case go to a full trial, but it was an eviction defense case, but it was a little bit different. But most of 95% of our cases settle. And so we are able to get relief for the individuals sooner, in those cases, and sooner means a few years as opposed to, I mean, they take federal court cases, especially, they take a long time. And I'll say we've gotten significant relief for folks. We settled a case last year with $63,000 in damages to an individual. Disability discrimination case. We had a case, you know, where an individual, you know, $20,000, $30,000 range in terms of the settlement, awards and settlement.
Are there any additional questions?
Is there a certain time frame for someone, if someone files a complaint and it was maybe 6 months ago, is that not a valid, I mean, is there a time frame to file a complaint based on what's occurred?
Under the human rights law, you have a year to
Thanks.
file them.
But in state or federal court, you have a 2-year statute of limitations, 3 years in a sexual harassment case. But you have a 2-year statute of limitations, and it's from the date of the last discriminatory act. So if it's like ongoing discrimination or a pattern of discrimination, we can sometimes go back further if we can show that it was ongoing. But I mean, there's times where we maybe would prefer to file a case administratively, but it was, you know, too long ago, and so we have to file in court because it's beyond the 1 year that's allowed. HUD is the same, also 1 year with HUD.
Any other questions? Comments? Yes.
This question is making it for you because I thought I saw appraisal on your bulletin.
Yes.
Okay. So I've seen this a couple of times, not so much within this area, but I've seen this before. And it was a minority family where they were refinancing. They already have their home, they're refinancing, and the appraisal was a lowball figure. They've already upgraded, you know, whatever they did to the home to add value, or it's been aged and improved, the term, I can't think of it. Anyway, they improved more about. Thank you, equity. And so it improved equity, but they had to have another appraisal done, which in fact was more appropriate and more, much more higher. Does your office handle something like that? And if so, what dynamics can come from that? What, you know, what type of, options that does the person have, or that's something more of an attorney can handle?
Well, they could certainly file a complaint with the division. I mean, they would, you know, if they felt that the appraisal was incorrect, and it was incorrect for a discriminatory reason, of the race or something like that. That's certainly something that we can take a complaint about and investigate. Yes.
And I'll also say that our colleagues at the New York State Department of State, they license appraisers, and they've been hearing about this problem actually quite a bit.
Mhm.
And so they can take complaints about specific appraisers too. And this is a situation where you could file with both of us at the same time. So you could file a Division of Human Rights complaint and you could file a Department of State complaint. If you call us, we can refer you to them. But they can look at appraisals and that sort of thing. It can be tough to look, sort of discern though.
There are some homeowners who gotten lowball appraisals and then have they basically whitewashed their house and had
Yes.
removed any, had a white friend pose as the homeowner, remove any family photos, artwork, books that may indicate that the owners are Black, and then have it reappraised. And then they end up getting higher values and higher appraisal amounts. There's been some cases nationally on that. There was one recently in Northern California with $500,000 difference in the appraisal between that case settled for an undisclosed amount. So I'm dying to know what the amount was that that family got, but there's been some cases that is on that issue as well. And the homeowners in some cases have kind of done their own like testing on it. But there's definitely some guidance out there on that.
It's just that the situation presents itself as the beginning and the end, but it doesn't show the in between as to who do they reach out to. And that's why when I saw it on your bulletin, that's why I wanted to make sure that was the case. Again.
All right. I think we've gone around the room with everyone who's had a question. So I just want to say thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your time, your interest in this subject, and just coming to spend the evening here with us. We know that everyone is very busy, has families to take care of. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you all to our panelists. If we could have a round of applause. This information available on the back table. We have some city employees still available here. Please feel free to chat briefly, but everyone should go home on time.